Today we are going to make a wind turbine model on TinkerCad. So we're going to break it into various parts. We're going to start with the tower, and then we'll move on to the gearbox, the blades, and then we'll put it all together. So let's start with the tower. So to start with your tower, you're going to go over to your tool box and you're going to pull out a paraboloid and place it on the work plane. And we want this to be 120 millimeters tall. So you're going to click on the box at the top. See how it just lit up red? And then you're going to click in here and you're going to type in 120 millimeters. And then we want it to have a diameter of 20. So let's just check. And yep, the diameter is 20, so we don't have to do anything there. And then if you look at a wind turbine tower, it doesn't have a point at the top because the generator box sits like right here. So we want to make it flat at the top. So we're going to grab another paraboloid. We're going to place it and we are going to make it, let's do 25 millimeters tall. And now what we're going to do is we are going to align and then group these two objects. But first this needs to be made a hole so that it'll cut off the top. And now we are going to align these two objects. So you want to align it on all dimensions, just like that. And now you're going to hit group, and it should take off the top of the tower. Okay, so now let's move on to our next step. Okay, so now we are going to make the gearbox. So you can see that we're stopping right before the blades attach. So it's going to have a flat side on one end and a curved side on the other. So to do that, we're going to come over here and we're going to grab a cylinder first. And we want our gearbox to be 35 millimeters tall with a 15-inch diameter. Or 15 millimeters, sorry. Okay. But notice how it is currently vertical, but we want it horizontal. So we're going to click on it and we're going to rotate it 90 degrees until it is horizontal. So now we have our horizontal cylinder, but we need to add on this curved part for our gearbox. So we're going to come over to the shapes and we're going to grab the half sphere. And we need this to have a 15 millimeter diameter, just like the cylinder. And then we're going to make this just a little taller. Oops. We'll make it 15 millimeters tall. Okay. And just like the cylinder, we now have to rotate it. So we're going to come over here and we're going to rotate it . We'll rotate. We're going to rotate it 90 degrees, just like the other one. So now we have our two parts, and we need to attach them. So we're going to drag them together so that there's just a little bit of overhang. Let me zoom in so you can see. First, let's align them. So we're going to align them on these two planes, but we're going to skip aligning them on this plane because if you watch, that'll throw the half circle into the cylinder, and we don't want that. So once they're aligned on 2 of the 3 planes, what we're going to do is we're going to drag our half circle until there's just a little bit of overlap. You can see it right there. And then we're going to go back to align just to make sure that they're still all aligned. And then we will group. Now you can see we have our gearbox. Okay, so now we are going to move on to the blades. So they get skinnier the closer you get to the point of the blade, and they're flatter but still have a little bit of dimension. So we're going to come over to our shapes and we're going to grab the cone. And we want our blades to be, let's do 70 millimeters tall. And then we want our width to be longer than our length, or our width to be shorter than our length to get that flatter look. So we're going to make the width 5 millimeters and the length 10 millimeters. So now you can see we have wider at the bottom, pointy at the top, and it's flatter, but it still has dimension. So now we're going to take this we're going to duplicate it 3 times. So now we have our 3 blades. So the last thing we need to make is this little cap piece that goes in front of the blades. So we're going to come over here and we're going to grab a half sphere and we're going to move it to our work plane. And as you know, our gearbox over here was 15 inches in diameter. So you can see that right there. So we're going to make our cap 15 inches in diameter too. Okay. And then we want it to be a little shorter. So we're going to flatten this out a little bit. By making it 7 millimeters in diameter. Okay, and then just like we did with our gearbox, we're going to rotate this so that it is horizontal instead of vertical. So we're going to come over here. And we're going to rotate it 90 degrees. There we go. So there's our cap that we will put on last. Okay, so now that we have our 3 blades, our cap, our gearbox, and our tower, we are going to start putting them together. So let's look at our picture, and we'll attach the tower and the gearbox first. So you can see that the tower and the gearbox, the end of the gearbox comes right about to the left edge of the tower. So that's what we're going to do with our model. So we're going to pull the tower into the middle of our work plane, and then we're going to grab our gearbox. And what we're going to do is we're going to align these 2 objects. So we want it to be near the top and in the middle. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move this gearbox onto our tower, but we want it to be a little higher so that we're not seeing the top part of it, because you don't see that in the picture. You see no tower right above the gearbox, so we need to make sure our model looks the same. And then we're going to realign these to make sure everything's still good. And it does look good. So we are ready to group now. So we're going to group these two objects. And there is our attached tower and gearbox. So now we're going to go back to our picture and we see the blades. So they come out of the gearbox. So we need to do the same with our design. So to start attaching our blades, we are going to start with the one that points upward. So we're going to come over here and we're going to drag it over here, and then we're going to align these two shapes. So to get a better view, we want it in the middle, and we want it against it. And then we're going to move our blade upward. Remember, we want just a little overlap, so I'll zoom in so you can see that. So see how you can see the little bit of overlap there? That is what we want. And then we're going to move this guy just a tad till he's right at the edge, like that. Now we're going to zoom out and we're going to make sure they're still aligned. I'm going to check our alignment here. They need to be recentered, and now they're good. Okay, so now we can group these two objects like that. And I will zoom in on what that looks like. So you can see how it is attached. And then we're not going to worry about this little bit of overhang because that's where our cap's going to go. So that's going to make it look nice and neat. So for now, we're just going to leave it. And zoom back out. And we're going to start on our second blade. So let's go back to our picture. And we can see that it's not quite 90 degrees to our tower. It's a little bit less. So now we're going to move on to modeling our second blade. So we pull it up and we need to give it that little bit of an angle. So we're going to come over here and we're going to rotate it a little more than 90 degrees. So we're going to go 112.5 degrees. And you can see that gives us that nice little bit of tilt. And then we're going to align our two objects. So we want it to be middle of this object, on edge of this object, and then we're going to zoom in for this next part so we can make sure we get it aligned right. We're going to move it over to our model. Let's get a better angle, and we need it to move a little bit this way, like that. Okay. And then we need it to go into our model with just a little bit sticking out just like the other one. And now we're going to realign to make sure everything is still good. Okay, it looks good. The only thing is we need to move this down just a little bit. So we're going to zoom out and we're going to move this guy down. Just a smidge. Let's zoom back in and see how that looks. You see that looks pretty good. So we will group these two objects. Now we have two blades attached. And again, we're not going to worry too much about this little bit of overhang because the cap will cover that once we are all done. So now we're going to go back to our picture and we're going to do very much the same thing with this blade. So you can see that this is 90 degrees and it's just a little less than 90 degrees. So with our next blade, we are going to rotate it 112 degrees as well. I'm going to pull it up. And we're going to rotate it. Instead of rotating it this direction, we're going to rotate it this direction this time. So there's 90. I'm going to go to 112.5, just like that. And now we are going to move this up to our model, and then we're going to align it. So I'm going to align it, make sure everything is good. And then we're just going to do some fine tuning. So we're going to zoom in on it. And we're going to pull this guy just a little bit out. Not by much, but just a little bit. And then we're going to move him down just a smidge, like our other one. So you can see that he needs to move down just a little bit more. Right there. Okay. And then we're going to check and make sure that everything is still good. And you can see that he needs to move a little bit out to match our first or our second blade. And now it looks good, so we're going to zoom out and we're going to group these objects. Okay, so now they are grouped, and our last step will be to put on the cap. So we're going to go back to our picture and we can see that the cap rests just in front of the blades. So we're going to pull our cap out here. And we can see that it's facing the wrong way. So we need to rotate it 90 degrees, just like that. And then we're going to move it up to the same height as our wind turbine. And then we're going to align these shapes. like that. And we see we need a little bit of fine tuning here. And we need to move this guy up. So let's move him up first. And then we'll move him back. And we see he still needs to move up just a tad. So we will move him up. That looks pretty good. So we're going to lie and see how we're doing. Now we're going to move out. We're going to check. We'll zoom in and see what it looks like. Make sure that we're right on. And we see that it needs to be moved in a little bit. A little over. So now we're going to turn it. Make sure it looks good on this side. Make sure it looks good from underneath. Make sure it looks good from the top. So it's looking good. So we just need to add that little bit of overlap like we've done with the other one. So we're going to move it in one more beat, and then we will group. So as you can see, it is now grouped in. And now that I'm looking at it, there's this little bit that needs to be fixed. So we're going to Command Z to ungroup. And then we're going to move it down just a smidge. And that looks good. So then we'll regroup. And see if that fixed it. So it looks good on this side, looks good, looks good. So now we have our wind turbine. And this is what it looks like. We have our 3 blades right here, here, and here. We have our gearbox, we have our cap, and we have our tower. So if you look at our picture, you will see the same thing. You need the gearbox, the tower, and the 3 blades, and then the cap. The only thing that's missing is the color. So in the picture, the wind turbine kind of has a grayish color, and that's what most wind turbines look like. They're kind of a grayish white. So we're going to go into our colors, and we're going to choose a color that looks good. And we will see our wind turbine is complete. So that is all it takes to make a wind turbine in TinkerCad.